now I've kind of wanted to turn roles and be that mentor for kids that, maybe just have questions.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the episode 11 of the Underrated Podcast, the podcast where we talk to you about sports and we rant about a bunch of stuff that we think should be ranted about. Today, we have a special guest. He's currently a defenseman for the Division I Swedish team, Borås. I think that's how it's pronounced. He played 4 years at Ryerson University, and he's currently working on a project to help bring children and families back to the world of hockey. Mark Corbett, how are you?
I'm good, guys. Thanks for having me on, and that's pretty well how you pronounce it. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. And obviously, we've heard a lot about you. Our previous guest, Chaz, obviously, you know him too. He told us a lot about you, and you seem like a mentor for many young children. And I think we're gonna get a little more into that. And I think we're gonna start off with we mentioned the foundation or maybe like the company that you're kind of doing. Can you tell us a bit more about that company that you're trying to start up?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something I wanted as a kid, and my parents didn't really have. Is kind of like just a mentor to just kind of bounce questions off of, because I think as a young person growing up in the minor hockey world, I think it's gotten a little bit crazier now with the politics and the pressures of playing. Is that a lot of parents have questions that maybe didn't play sports, and they don't really have anywhere to go for answers. And as I was growing up, I always kind of looked to those older guys as role models, but also to ask my questions. And now I've kind of wanted to turn roles and be that mentor for kids that, maybe just have questions about, tryouts or summer training. Or, to be honest, it's a lot of parents that are putting a lot of pressure on kids because they just kind of feed off of what other parents are doing. And that might not be the best option for their kids. So I think a lot of parents just have questions, and they fall into a trap of what everyone else is doing instead of worrying about kind of their kid individually.
Is there some sort of inspiration that kind of inspired you to start it up? Like, not only did you know as a kid that you wanted to do this, but is it something that maybe wanted you to continue to do it, like an inspiration?
It kind of started over the last couple of years. I started having a lot of families kind of reach out, and you know what I mean? Like, I never played in the NHL. I never played in the American Hockey League. So I kind of always had to take the harder path to everywhere I got. And I got a lot of no's, and I got a lot of, you're not good enough. And I kind of want to be there for those kids that get that, because the way kids are kind of brought up nowadays is that any negative feedback, kids just kind of shut down. And when I grew up, it was a bit, you had to take that negative and turn it into a positive. And now I think a lot of the kids just take a negative and just kind of get into a bad spot. So over the last couple of years, I had a lot of families approach me just about advice. And, sometimes it's just even questions about, what do I do with my son that's, struggling a bit with his coaching, or, he's not getting enough ice time, or, he doesn't want to play at the AAA level. So I just started to see like a trend of a lot of parents asking a lot of questions and not having answers. And I also saw a lot of kids kind of feeling a pressure from their parent to play hockey that maybe they just don't enjoy it, or they just want to play AA to have fun, or single A, but they feel that pressure from their parents to play AAA.
That's obviously amazing. And if there's any of our viewers that maybe your parents or children that maybe need that kind of help, do you want to tell them how they can contact you?
Yeah. So, because I just got back, and with everything going on in the world, it's just kind of slowly starting out. Maybe we could put a link in for my email right now, because I'm just kind of trying to build the brand in the sense of I just want to be very raw and honest with people. And I want to have that interaction face to face, instead of just being, throwing up a website and being like, hey, I'm so-and-so, let me help you. I just really want to connect with people and just hear their story and say, like, how can I help? Or like, what are you missing that you want answers to? Because sometimes it's something simple where you just need someone else to say it for you, and you recognize that, okay, I knew that, but I hear it from someone else, and it makes me feel better. Because like, I'm not going to say I have every answer, but I've been through a lot, and I just want to use my knowledge and life experience to try and help other people.
Yes, so his email will be down, link in the description, either that be YouTube or anything else, that'll be linked in the description. If you guys have any questions, you guys can go ahead.
All
There you
right.
go.
Speaking of overseas hockey and the fact that you play for Boris HC, how did you initially get into playing overseas? Like, how did you how did you get into those leagues that you currently play for or have played for in the past?
I actually started out of university. To be honest, every year I've kind of graduated on from a different level. I always thought that was kind of it. Like when I was in junior, didn't really have I had some D1 interest and stuff like that. And to be honest, Ryerson approached me and I had never even heard of youth sports, which I think is becoming a lot more popular nowadays. And then after university, I was like, I just wanted to get a good education. And then if I could do something with hockey, great. And if I couldn't, that would be okay too. And kind of in the lower, I would say like the semi-pro leagues, it's a lot of word of mouth. Because to be honest, at the end of the day, and this is something that made me want to do this mentorship program, is a lot of agents and advisors and kind of all that is if you're a top guy, you're their top priority. But if you're not a top guy, you're not their top priority. So I feel like a lot of people fall into these traps, not traps, but of really trying to see who's there for their best interest and not just there for a paycheck at the end of the day. And to be honest, I started over in France after a couple of years of playing in the States. And it was just through a friend of mine that played there. And he's like, listen, I had an amazing experience. I never played in the leagues that were the get-rich leagues by any means. But my life experience of Europe and getting over there through friends is kind of just that equals a lot of money to me at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's perfect. So you were talking about collegiate hockey more there. How was it like what's collegiate hockey life like for those who, of course, don't know? I don't know what it's like. What's it like? What was it like for you when you played at Ryerson?
Like I said, to be honest, I knew nothing about youth sports until my 20-year-old year of junior, and I got called out of the dressing room, and this guy, the coach at the time from Ryerson, was like, "Hey, I'm so and so," and I was kind of like, "Okay, what? Where's?" I didn't even know where Ryerson was, to be honest. And I live 45 minutes from Toronto. But that's just how you're so brainwashed, I find, as a kid to go NCAA or go to the OHL and you just don't even hear about youth sports. And I think it's very underrated. And to be honest, I had a great time. And for me, it was, again, I didn't know if I was going to play after. So I was more looking at the education side of things because I had D3 schools interested in stuff. But I was like, if I come out of D3 and I try and apply for a job back in Ontario and they're like, what school is this? I've never even heard of it, over someone that maybe went to Ryerson or U of T or whatever. And it was that much more reputable. But it was an amazing experience. And it's not like the States where the crowds are crazy for hockey and sports, but you get that student athlete aspect of life and you get a great education out of it. And I think that's something I want to always tell kids too, is that as a kid, there's NCAA and OHL, but there's also so many other possibilities to go with in the future.
And so when they approached you for Ryerson, obviously didn't, as you said, you didn't know who they were, but was that, once you got to know that, was that an inspiration to you? Was that like, wow, I just made a next step? I'm going to that next step?
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest, it's kind of rewarding. You work so hard and you defy all those odds, and all of a sudden you have someone approach you instead of you kind of chasing schools or you chasing people. And it's just that's what you work for as a kid. Again, it wasn't the NHL or whatever, but that was kind of okay, I've got to that next step, whether it was NCAA or the OHL or U Sports. It was just a really rewarding feeling. And sometimes I think people get lost up in, like you mentioned, some of the guys that just went through the OHL draft. A lot of kids will take it as a negative if they don't get drafted. And it's there's so many possibilities if you don't get drafted, or even if you get drafted in the last 5 rounds, sometimes that doesn't really mean anything. So it's just understanding. And that's what I want to educate parents and kids on, what else hockey can do for you if instead of looking at all these negative aspects of setbacks, I guess you could say.
Have you always been I'm gonna go, were you once that kid that was I'm gonna try to go for the NHL, I'm gonna try to go OHL? Were you that once? And then once you got to the point where you realized that may not be an option, were you still downed, or were you I can go somewhere else?
I mean, absolutely. I think every kid that starts hockey, it's probably because they have a dream of playing in the NHL, or their parents played hockey or whatever it was, their brothers. But you also get to that point where some people can realize a little bit sooner than others that, you know, the NHL is just not going to be an option. And what I want people to do is not take that as a negative. Is just like, okay, like what's the next best thing, or what's the next best path for me? And I saw it as like, you know, I played 2 years of midget, and I still thought like, okay, like, you know, I haven't made a junior team yet. Like maybe this is it. And then, you know, you get that chance on a junior team, and then you're like, okay, maybe I can aim for that university. So I always try to use those negatives as a motivation, I guess you could say, to kind of defy the odds. And all those people that told me like, I don't know if you can play at the next level, is like, I always took it as like, okay, like, thanks, but I'm going to go show you that I can.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I just kind of have a follow-up question after. Do you think that people should look at kind of overseas hockey as more of like another option, or do you think people should look at it as like a next step, like, hey, I can play hockey, rather than, oh, it's like the last place I can go to?
I mean, I think like, I know a lot of people kind of like try North America first, and then like you said, like kind of go over to Europe as like kind of their next step or the end of their career type thing. But to be honest, like I've seen kids right out of junior just kind of like skip school, to be honest, and go do it online and go right over to Europe. And I think what people forget is that like playing hockey in Europe's cool, but also like experiencing culture and the way that world works in different countries is just like, it's so, I've been so fortunate to play in, you know, 3 or 4 different countries, and I've seen probably 12 to 15 different countries just by going over there. And I think a lot of people are nervous to go over and do that because it's not something that everyone can handle, is 8 months away from home, and you know, you're not a car drive away either. So I think it's a great opportunity, not just again for the hockey part of it, but just for a life experience.
Like a life experience, yeah.
And you've seen maybe not in like the Swedish leagues, but you've seen in the KHL, who Matthew's actually a fan of, and you've seen many of those guys that grow up to be NHL stars. And so what you're trying to say is, or essentially what you're trying to say is that if you're in a different league, doesn't mean you don't have a chance, but it's just a bit different than what you may expect as a kid.
Yeah, I mean, I just think everyone's going to have their own path, and what I want to do is show people that you don't have to follow anyone. You know, everyone has their, you know, I have friends that weren't drafted to the OHL and have played 250 NHL games, you know, so I think it's just showing kids and parents that because everyone says you have to do it this way, you don't have to. Everyone's going to have their NHL, whether, like for me, playing in Europe and playing till I'm 29 years old was my NHL. And yes, I would have loved to play in the NHL, but you know, the statistics of who actually makes it is far and few between.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. So it's just like, you know, you have to find, yes, always dream of the NHL. I'm not here to say don't, but always realize that there's so much more out there if you don't make the NHL.
And that's what you're giving kids maybe the opportunity to, through maybe either calls or reaching out for you, kids that maybe don't have the opportunity to like go to the NHL. Like you're going to say to them, I was in that position too, and you can go whatever you want. And you can think that's the NHL, like you said, it's your NHL. Like you're just there to say to the kids that this is not over for you. You can just go somewhere else and play.
Absolutely. Like my kind of slogan is like, what's the next best dream? Because everyone dreams of the NHL, but what's your next best dream? Like mine was like, okay, I want to make junior, then I want to make university, then I want to try pro, whether it's the NHL, whether it's the SPHL, whether it's the second league in Europe. It's like, that's an achievement in itself. And I think a lot of kids, like example, you know, 15-year-olds, when they don't get drafted to the OHL, it's like, oh man, like my career's over, because they look at the next guy beside them and they see, well, he got drafted. So like, that means like, I'm not good enough. But it's like, it's maybe not that you're not good enough. It's just like, maybe you're going to develop, like in my midget year, I was behind 3 defensemen that got drafted. And when I got to midget, I had a absolute standout year. So like, I needed my time to kind of shine, I guess you could say. And everyone gets that at a different age.
Well, we thank you, Mark, so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Some great stories, and obviously you have a great story coming up again with the foundation. So if you guys ever want, if you're a parent, if you're a kid that ever wants to talk to somebody about maybe your sports path, Mark's email is in the description on YouTube. It's in stuff like, it's everywhere. It's in the description, so if you guys need to contact him, you guys can go ahead and click the link in the description. And we thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.